Welcome back, my friends, to the Sweet Spot, where IT leaders share the insight with other leaders and others that want to lead. My name is Carlos Vargas, and as in every week, my two co-hosts, Howard Holden and Paul Lewis.
How's
I
it
would
going?
like it to be known that Howard is just known as Howard now. Carlos and I have our last names, but starting January 1st, Howard is now going by one name only.
True. Do you really
Which
need a last
season?
name though? I mean, is there more than one? There's more than one Paul. There's more than one Carlos. There really should only be one Howard.
It is a hilarious thing I do at Pythian in all circumstances, whether I'm on we're doing like a trivia or I'm doing a presentation. I always put Paul Lewis CTO in all circumstances. No spaces between. One thing, because I need them to know.
You need them to know.
So wait, your room is like twice the size of Howard's room last week.
My room is huge. This is, first of all, this is just the first room. I have 3 of these rooms.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
that's insane.
Nice large suite in downtown Toronto today.
I'm glad they gave you a nice large suite in the city that is the least valuable.
Like, sorry, but I don't get a lot of Marriott value out of a Toronto stay.
Right.
That's for sure.
Well, that was like the conference I went to. I think it was last year. It might have been the year before, where they put me in the presidential suite at a Denver hotel. That thing had seating for 21 people. There were 21 like chairs, couch things that had seating.
At least you had a lot of people locally you could bring, right? And do
Sure.
a quick D&D game.
Sure. I did call my wife and say, honey, you got to come check this thing out.
Right.
Like, you got to make time to get down here once.
So
Nice.
then, where are we in the world this week?
I am.
You two are at home, looks like.
Yep, I am home. Next
Oh,
week, I
so-
will not be. Next
Okay.
week, I'm going to go visit SpaceX. So that should be fun.
Nice.
Ooh.
Are you meeting with the top dog or just
I hope not, because I don't think I could bite my tongue.
You'll be providing an opinion.
Well, yes, there are probably 3 humans that I don't think I could bite my tongue around. They'd get an opinion from me one way or the other.
I see.
Right? One is a former president of ours. One is Elon Crazy Pants Musk, and then the third is likely the Pope.
The Pope. This one or all popes? Is your-
All.
Okay.
They represent an institution that had a real weak response to I don't know, hundreds of thousands of children being abused. Like,
We're
Rough.
we're going hard on this episode.
So that's interesting because I think that you mentioned 3 people that should be at some way
has to step
thinking.
out of the gene pool.
Oh
I'm
no,
sorry.
I was gonna say that they should be improving or thinking about how to improve because they're at a certain level. Like some are leading, some are developing new technology. As technology leaders, do you guys take the time to think about like your progression, what you went through, and where you got there, or that just
Constantly.
something?
Constantly. There is not it is a rare day that goes by where I don't think about how I have improved in the last some period of time and what I need to do to improve in the future and what that looks like and the specific tactical things I need to do to continue my evolution and improvement.
Like, what's an example? What's an example of a thing that you've improved upon and how you measured it?
So a lot of times it's feedback, right? So I'll get feedback, and I'm rough, right? I'm tough as a customer. I've been a customer of yours, Paul.
Yes.
I like that you're laughing.
That's because I was told before I met you that you were a tough customer. I was like pre-warned to say, now you're about to meet Howard. He has received the best service with the least price because he wouldn't buy anything until it was true.
Yes, that is true. I actually got a phone call from a DM. Hey, buddy, we can't do another deal like that one. I went, like, what? And he goes, we lost a little bit of money on that one.
That's
mean,
over the coals.
Like we lost money on the hardware. Forget about the service. You got service and stuff for free. We lost money on the hardware. We can't do another one of those. I'm like, dude, all you had to do was call. Like I'm tough, but I try not to be unreasonable.
Right.
And so, being on the customer side for as long as I have, and especially being in the exec chair where it was all on me, and not having time made me abrupt. Right.
Right.
Some of the
Yeah.
feedback that I've received is oof, he's rough. Right. And
Right.
so thinking through my approach, how do I get the same thing across without being quite as abrupt? How much more can I listen? I'm 47. I'm an old dog at this point, but even this old dog is changing is learning new tricks. You know what I mean? And I realize that's a soft skill, but that's an example.
Is that, like, when you say that, is that from you to an employee, you to an employer, you to a vendor? Like, what's you to a customer? Like, what angle?
This is me to a customer, right?
Mm.
I don't really have vendors anymore. Not in the traditional sense. It's actually kind of weird as a head of the head technical person in an analyst firm to have vendors is weird.
Right.
The relationship it couldn't be more different.
Right.
Right. Because now it's just, hey, like I'm calling you because we did a report, you came out well, so I figure you kind of know what you're doing. Rather than let me take a look at a bunch of people, I can be very selective and very focused and have some insider knowledge when I have those conversations.
Right. So you've become more patient. You listen more to the request.
Yeah, and with I make sure I know my audience before I am totally brutally honest. Right. I value brutal honesty, like you would not imagine. But I find most people don't. Even though they say they want it, they simply do not.
Yeah.
And
mostly because they don't imagine it to be as brutal as what they're about to receive.
Well, they don't imagine it's going to be as honest.
Right.
And they don't necessarily know what to do with it.
Right.
Right. And I find people take entirely too many things personally.
Right.
Right. It's like, it's not personal. There's no piece of it that's personal. Right. I don't assume that you built that graphic knowing it sucked. You were just in it. You know what I mean? Like, it's really, really, really hard to be in something and see it objectively and see it through the eyes of your customer. Right. It's really hard. And people take that stuff personally. It doesn't make sense to me, but I've learned that it is a truism and therefore it's a me problem, not a them problem. If that makes sense.
Fair. And what I've learned over time, and I think when I evaluate things that I do, there's the objective ones, which is, stagecraft. I can see that I've improved over time, and I can see that by audience reaction in many ways, right? It's entirely obvious. If I had 0 people ask questions versus 100, 0 people come up to me afterwards, or 100, clearly a big difference between the two.
Yep.
Even though I'd usually always rate myself as a B-. Almost in all circumstances, I'll say B-. Some of that is just to say, there was something I knew I wanted to say, I never said it, and that forced me to not be an A, right? There was this thing that I knew going in, I really wanted to make this point, and then over an hour I forgot to make the point. I just didn't bring it up, which is insane, because I was like burdening myself with that one point this entire time, and then just skipped it.
Well, and the whole time in your own head, you're going, if I don't make this point, this whole thing's a waste. If I don't make this point, this whole thing's a waste. If I don't make this point, it's over. And I didn't make that point. And everybody thought it was great. And you're like, no, I missed out on this big point. It could have been so much better with this big point. And when it's all said and done, if you'd have made the big point, it would have been received exactly the same way it was received without the big point.
Right, because they probably wouldn't have remembered the point, even though I thought it was key to my entire message.
Right, but you're in it, and they're not in it.
Right.
It's really hard to be in something and see it objectively.
Yeah.
Right. And for the record, you made me think of something. So okay. It's my big point. I think anyone that is struggling to figure out how to develop good stagecraft, go run a Dungeons and Dragons game. Right. Because I'm telling you right now, it highlights this point better than anything I've ever done in my life. Because effectively, and I don't care if you're reading from a module or you're completely rolling your own adventure.
Yeah.
The whole time you feel like you're barely keeping your head above water, right? Players are throwing stuff at you. They're asking stuff constantly. You're constantly trying to react to what they're saying while read ahead enough that you know what's going on, not provide the wrong information, not provide too much information, give it all back to them and all this stuff. and you feel like you're drowning the whole time.
Hmm.
And I've been doing that for 35 years. D&D, right? Still to this day, we just played on Saturday. I still feel like I'm behind. I still feel like I'm drowning. You know what? The players never notice it.
Right.
The audience never notices it. To them, it's fantastic every time. Right.
And then at the end, are you satisfied that you did a good job?
No, there's always room for improvement. Right.
So
When it's all said and done, I'm constantly going back over it, going, "Oh no, I wish I'd have done this different. No, I wish I'd done this
So
different."
you're a B minus
Always
self-assessor.
Yeah.
so do you see yourself as that, or do you see the team that you're leading as that is going through the same challenge, that they're not getting to where they
I
should be?
self-assess a B minus almost entirely, right? For two reasons. One, I'm not necessarily objective in evaluating my own self. And then two, there's always something I should have done differently when I run it through my head again.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing I think, other than stagecraft, that I think I have absolutely improved on, even in the last 5 years, has been leading executives. Now, I've led VPs and SVPs in my life, but the teams are much bigger, right? So arguably less impactful because any one decision could be fixed by one of 1,000 people, right? When you lead a much smaller team, however, leading the executives, the turns are much quicker. And therefore, you can make a wrong decision and have immediate negative impact to that. And therefore, I have to really evaluate how I'm leading those type of individuals. I have to, in many ways, think a couple steps ahead and make a determination on whether I'm willing to take the risk of left, right, or center before I help them sort of make decisions, which is not something I would have done in the past. I would have just made quick decisions based on what I know at the time, turn left. And if left wasn't right, fine, go right. But when it's a much smaller organization, left might have detrimental financial impacts.
Therefore, again, you're in the back of the bus.
That's right.
Right. When it's a huge organization, you're in the back of the bus and the bus is full.
Right.
And therefore, you're just telling the person in front of you, hey, do this. And the person in front does the same thing. And by the time the game telephone plays out, right, everyone has added their own experience, their own knowledge, their own domain expertise, and it gets to the front. And it's actually a much softer message.
Right.
Right. And the right thing ends up happening. It may not be as emphatic. It may not be as fast. It may not be any of those things, right? Because it's gonna have softened as it made its way through the bus.
Yeah.
But when you're at a small company, it's a minivan,
right?
And you lean forward and talk directly to the driver, and the driver goes, "Oh crap!"
Right, 90-degree turns.
90-degree
organization versus 30-degree turns,
right?
In bigger organization, right? Which you can recover from in any real way. So my leadership style has changed in that not only just small to large organization, but I focus way more of my time and energy now on the individual and not the business. So good, bad, or indifferent, whatever the situation in front of me, it's much more about what can I do for your next 5 years versus what can I do for you this week. It's less important to me, right? I'm less concerned about whether I think you make a good short-term decision because I wouldn't put you in the position if I didn't think you could. So therefore, that's now not in my top of mind. It's not something I think about on an occasional basis. I think much more about if you were to do this decision, Mr. Person who reports to me, what's the net impact to your career? Like, what's the social impact to this? What is the impact to your peers? What's the impact to your how a CEO would envision you in making this decision? That's what I help them realize, and that's where I spend my time now versus the actual real decision that I just let them make.
Sure.
Yep.
So if you think about that improvement,
yeah.
What is your thinking through that process to improve yourself? Like where you go, what you do, and what you do for your people so they can improve also. Because you're mentioning that that's a big area that is needed. So how do you guys do it? And then how do you take your people through that process?
So I tend to reflect on the mistakes I made last week. And sometimes a mistake is just, I didn't know how to do this thing. And I found myself off balance.
Right.
Right. And then I go, okay, cool. I didn't really know enough about this thing last week. I need to know more about this thing. What do I know that is near field to this thing? As in, what is the distance between what I know right now and what the knowledge I need so that I can say I know this thing,
Mhm.
right? And if it's like nuclear physics, no, I'm not going to get there, right? Therefore, I need to find an expert. As in, anytime a nuclear physics question comes to me, great, I haven't got a clue, let's go to the expert, right? Maybe I'll get a 7th grade education in nuclear physics, which is just enough to know this person is not going to waste the time of my expert,
Right.
right? Most, I don't find myself in that situation most of the time. Not. I just don't get asked the questions that are like that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's not that I have a full knowledge everywhere. So then it's really just how much of this, like how near field is this, and how much of this do I need to know to be an expert at my job, not an expert in the thing. That's a common mistake I see made.
Right.
An expert in my job, right?
What is the difference?
The difference can be enormous, right? I
Mhm.
don't need to be a CFO, but I need to be able to communicate with my CFO. Therefore, I need to understand P&L well enough to have an intelligent conversation, right? I need to understand finance well enough to have an intelligent conversation. I do not need to understand enough to survive an audit from an auditor.
Right.
It's not my job, right? But I do need to have an intelligent conversation about the fair and reasonable use of corporate finance, right? How do we actually pay for things? Where is the income going? How much of it's going out, and are we spending intelligently? Are we spending reasonably? Right. I need to be able to make a request, and my request needs to be complete, so the CFO doesn't feel like, like I've left her out in the lurch. I don't spend any time. I don't know why I'm spending time talking about the CFO. I don't spend any time learning about that right now. But
Right.
it's
Well,
just,
you did.
but I did. It's at one point. Yeah.
Are you finding that your velocity in asking or answering questions has changed over the last 10 years? The speed of which you either ask questions or the speed of which you make decisions.
I ask questions much faster than I did in the past.
Same. In fact, that would be the biggest change in my leadership style over the last 10 years.
I would actually say if I went back in time and gave myself some advice, one piece of advice would be ask the question earlier, dummy.
Right.
Because we often don't ask the question because we almost feel like we should know it, therefore it's expected that we know it, therefore we probably do know it. We're just not thinking about it the right way or hard enough.
Right.
When in fact, there's so much that comes at us that's new. If you just ask the damn question and get it out of the way, 1, you get educated. 2, you've come to the answer faster. 3, you've put yourself in the position of at least knowing what the next step is. You know what I mean? You're not wasting time. There's no churn. And I have yet to find anybody that's like, ooh, I'm surprised you asked that question. You probably should have known that.
Yeah.
And if I did, that's another sign I don't want to work for that person.
Yeah. It is fair to say that my limiting factor of asking questions was shame in asking the question.
Yeah. Ego.
And that I would be perceived as somebody who should have known but didn't know, and therefore I'm less important to the organization. When in fact, what most people realize, especially people who work for you, that you have a lot of knowledge and they don't expect you to know everything. In fact, it is their pleasure to answer those questions, especially if arguably they're easy, right? What does this acronym mean? Because I'm not familiar with that acronym. Oh, well, let me give you 3 minutes on that acronym. They love to do that. And they're what I would have expected, that they think I should know that, they didn't actually expect it. Because you know other things, right? I'll ask you questions because you clearly know other things. I don't need you to know everything. And that was a pretty big swing in terms of sort of how I led people, how I interact with customers, how do I interact with vendors. A very, very big swing.
Yep. And as a leader, I'm never bothered when someone asks me a question, no matter what the level.
Right.
I am absolutely bothered when they waste a bunch of time because they didn't know something that could have been solved with an easy ask of a question.
Right.
Yeah. Time is by far the most important resource we have. And I promise you, the 3 minutes you give up asking a question that may be dumb will save you days, hours, days, weeks, months. Like,
Right.
So can you go a little bit deeper into then how you take then your people? Because you both talk about how you do it. Now, how do you get your people so they can improve?
For me, the number one way is to lead by example. If I want people to ask questions, I ask questions. Right? If I want people to act to say things a certain way, I make sure that I say it that way, and then I talk about why I did that. Right? This podcast. frankly, is a really good way, because we're pretty open and honest in this podcast. Like this,
Mhm.
we spent, I don't know, 15 minutes now talking about our own shortcomings,
Right.
Yep.
right? Nothing else,
Yep.
right? We haven't talked about how awesome we are. We've just talked about the things we didn't know, the mistakes we've made. They happen daily, at least several times a day. Forget about that, just professionally. Like the mistakes I make with my wife are minute by minute. I mean, that's
Right. Innumerable.
yeah. Well,
Well, at least
I think with our new puppy, my dog is she's not new. Like I just got her. She's like a year old, but
right.
she is the puppy. I think my wife is convinced she listens better and is more trustworthy and is better behaved and smarter than her husband. So
and peas less on the carpet.
yes, and I'm not certain that she's wrong. But professionally, we make mistakes. They may be visible only to us, right? But I make mistakes every day.
Yep.
And I'm constantly trying to improve those mistakes. And so being able to talk about them and having the being safe enough within yourself to be able to talk about them with your team, talk about them with other people, bring that back to the team. That's what I prefer to do. Right? I'm not perfect, therefore I do not expect perfection.
Mm.
One mistake that I made, I was trying to do something good for the team, and I said, look, I pay you all to make mistakes. That's what I pay you for. I don't pay you for success. I pay you to make mistakes. We can all find success, but if we're not making mistakes, we're not taking risks. So I'm paying you to make mistakes. That did not go over well. The team did not appreciate that message at all.
Right.
Really?
They really did not appreciate that message at all. It
How
created.
did they receive the message? Like what were they hearing when you said those words?
Well, what they heard was, I'm full of crap.
They didn't believe you.
That is correct. They heard an unbelievable message. Right? Because the first thing they heard was, they're paid to make mistakes, and they've been fired for making mistakes before, and therefore it's a BS message. We're paid to succeed. Right? The point is, you're not going to get fired for making a mistake, because if you're not making mistakes, then we're not trying hard enough. We're not pushing the envelope. We're not aiming for greatness.
Right.
And what they heard was, if I make a mistake, I'm going to get fired because I've been fired before. But I think they missed the point and the purpose of the statement.
But you do concede that that's probably
it's on me.
Their actual experience. Right.
And it's on me.
Yeah.
Right. When the message is received wrong, I don't go, oh, the team just is dumb. No, they're not dumb. These are smart, intelligent, reasonable people that do excellent work. So it's my message that was wrong.
Right.
That was a mistake I made. I still haven't figured out what that message is supposed to be. I haven't figured out the ideal language for that. But I just know that one's really wrong. So I won't use that one again.
And it's one of your principles.
Correct.
Either way.
Correct.
And I have found that I communicate my principles differently also.
Yeah.
I spend a good portion of my time not only with my team, but I also spend time with, we'll call them newly minted vice presidents, right?
Sure.
One-on-one, they don't report to me necessarily directly, but we work together in the grand scheme of things. And we won't really have a one-on-one about the business itself. It's not a tactical event. It's not, you tell me about your projects, I'll tell you about mine. It's more about, here's a behavior I witnessed. I would suggest to you that the behavior of a VP is different than a behavior of a senior director. And let me walk you through the principles that are the difference. And just to show you sort of reaction between a senior director and a VP, as an example. Individual contributors, by their very nature, fear executives. Like it or not, that's the reality of life.
Sure. Yep.
So as you get promoted from senior director to VP, even the people who report to you now perceive you as different. You go from us to them very, very quickly, potentially even within a month. So how you interact with your team and your peers actually now requires you to change your behavior, right? Because you're now perceived as, I'm going to use the word loosely, the enemy, right? You're the them, you're not the us, and therefore you now need to be correctly. So that's part of that conversation. So it's less about spending my time making decision X and more of my time saying, let's talk about what it means to be at this level. That's at least 80% of my time and energy in terms of leadership conversation. which is not something I would have spent as much time on, in fairness, in my 30 years.
Sure.
Maybe the last 5, I spent time having those kind of conversations.
I think it's an N+1 or N+2 conversation.
Yeah.
Right? As in the level I'm at +1 or the level I'm at +2.
Right.
Anything above that is the enemy. Right. So there are definitely organizations where senior director is already the enemy.
Sure. Yeah.
It's generally like there are some organizations I've seen where director is the enemy. Director is too far disconnected from the work done by an IC,
Right.
and you don't see them. Like you just don't see your director.
Right.
Therefore, when your director shows up, it's a bad day.
Right.
Right. And that's something that I think everyone in leadership needs to work on. Right.
Mhm.
When you walk into the room, does the tone of the room change?
Right.
Do you want the tone of the room to change? And does it change in a way that's positive or change in a way that's negative? If it's fear, it's negative. Period. End of statement.
That's right.
Right. And if you think that's a good thing, you are wrong.
And
Right.
and your words ring differently based
Correct.
on that level. You might have said the exact same sentence 2 months before when you were one level less, but they now hear the words very differently.
For
They
sure.
almost hear encouragement as a threat now, even though you've used the exact same words with the exact same tone.
Yeah, for sure.
So what do you guys then do when you coach someone as an example for that? Because that's a very good example that you come into the room, or could be a virtual room or could be a physical room, and everybody changes their reaction. What is something that the people that are listening to us can take as an action item and say, hey, I'm doing this. Here's an option that I can change.
I have a couple hard, but you start.
I try to be the most human person in the room.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I try to do. Right. The bigger the room is, the more time should be spent being human. Right. If the executive walks in the room and the first thing you do is business.
Yep.
Right. Then you are just that meme. You are just that avatar. Right. But if you walk in the room and you are human for a few minutes, right, you catch up with everybody and you make it important. Right. It's important to understand what you're doing. It's important to laugh. It's important to have a little bit of fun. It's important to be a human being, and then transition to business and make it a a real thing. Like, if somebody tries to push it, if you've set aside say 4 minutes, right? I like 4 minutes because 5 feels like we need to get started, right? But you set aside 4 minutes and someone tries to push the meeting. Go, just a minute. We still got a minute or two. Just mellow. You know what I mean? Be human.
Yeah.
Be the most human person in the room.
Yeah. I always take the tack that the only people in the room who work for me are the people who directly work for me. So if I have a hierarchy in the room, everybody in there isn't my direct report, and therefore they're not going to take direct leadership from me, like direction. And I don't want them to think that. I don't want them to think I'm about to say things that are overruling their direct manager or their manager's manager or eventually me. If I'm in a room with lots of hierarchy, then I'm there to motivate and inspire. I'm not there to provide
And listen.
specific direction.
And listen, right? Like if there's a bunch of people in the room and I don't communicate with them, I'm going to phrase it a little different, and I don't communicate with them one-on-one frequently, then really my goal should be set direction, set the stage, and listen a lot.
That's right.
And ask questions rather than make statements. I find the worst thing the most dangerous thing an executive can do is make statements.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Statements are orders. That's just how they get interpreted.
Yeah.
And so you really have to be, when I make mistakes, a lot of times the mistake I made was making a statement before listening all the way. Right. Making a statement that was easily misinterpreted, versus asking a question. There, I could probably think through, I don't have specific ones on top of my head, you know what I mean? But if I reflected on 20 meetings, there were probably 20 times, at least once per meeting, maybe 40 times, where rather than that statement, if I'd have replaced that statement with a question and made a statement later within that same thread of conversation, I would have had a better outcome.
Yeah. My general philosophy with a hierarchy in a room is that it's not the time and place for task creation and distribution. That happens after, right?
Yep.
There's a time and place for listening, time and place for motivation, time and place for setting a strategic direction, but the actual activity of creating and dividing tasks go through the hierarchy. I don't want them to get their marching orders from me. I want them to get marching orders from their manager. So then it doesn't look like I'm overriding that hierarchy of information flow that needs to occur.
No, ideally direction.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Direction.
certainly waypoints, right?
Yep.
Certainly we're going northwest this time. I don't know what the end goal is at the point, but I know I'm going northwest until such time as we go north-northwest.
By
And I'll let
direction,
you know when we go north-northwest.
by direction, I specifically mean directionality.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like, here's the strategy. Here's the reason we're doing this. Here's the why.
Right.
I'd really prefer to not get into the how. There may be certain pieces of the how that I'm passionate about, that I feel strongly about. So cool, I may point those out. But for the most part, I'm not into the how. Like, I'm not doing it. Therefore, right. Therefore, the how is not super important to me. And when the how is super important to me, it's for one of two reasons, and I'm pretty firm that it's just these two. One, this is how it reflects upon the brand.
Right.
Right. And therefore, brand integrity is my job in the room before anybody else's, in addition to everyone else's, but it is mine first. The second reason is I actually have done some of this work in this way, and this is what I get as feedback, and therefore this is the opinion that I have.
Mm.
Right. If I wouldn't have number two if I didn't do that work. Right. So if we're talking about a topic and I don't participate in the work itself, then I don't have an opinion on two.
Yep.
I still will almost always have an opinion on one. Right. The brand.
Do you think your perspective of importance of job or importance of career has evolved over the last 5-6 decades?
Yes.
Yes. Mine also has.
What I thought was important when I was in my 20s isn't important at all in my 40s. Right.
Meaning elevation, escalation,
all of it.
promotion,
No, I mean,
title,
all of
salary.
Yeah, all of it.
All of it.
Right. I think there's a point where I'm not remotely ready to be retired. I'd like freedom.
Sure. Freedom
Right.
45. Yeah.
Right. But that's kind of funny. No, I just say that because I was roughly 45 when that occurred to me.
Right. And thought to myself, only 22 more decades and I'm good to go.
Well, but that's the thing. I don't really see retirement as that freedom either.
Right.
Right. The freedom is not worrying about where the next paycheck's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's it. That's the totality of it. It ends there. It's not the freedom to not work.
Right.
I've worked since I was 11. I took 3 weeks off. It was the perfect amount of time because I spent the last week going, Jesus, I got to get back to work. I don't know what I'm doing with myself. Right. So there's not a ton of appeal in retirement for me. Retirement for me is I can do all of the things I would like to do and not have to worry about whether I'm making someone else money so I stay employed.
Right.
I can take big swings in retirement. I can't take big swings now. Right. I'm limited by the need to have a paycheck next week.
I generally call that I make career decisions now based on my ability to choose my own adventure, where I can spend the time I wish to spend it on.
Yeah.
So if that requires 40 hours a week at initiative A and 20 hours at initiative B and 10 at initiative C, then great. I can mix and match as I desire, as I wish.
Yeah. Seniority, what seniority has gained for me is not power, right? It's control over my own destiny.
Yeah, my own time, my own. Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's really it, and that is the driving factor for me now.
And I'm not sure power is actually even true. Like, I don't feel any more powerful now than I ever have in my entire career.
No. Because
ultimately I don't make every decision. So I can't possibly think that is creating any more power for me. Like I don't have invincibility, right? That hasn't.
But going back to 20, there was certainly a perception of power, right? And there was a bit of a chase for it, right? Which had more to do with I'm tired of being told to do stupid things by stupid people,
right?
Just to be blunt, right? When you're at the end of the tail, the tip of the tail, and you're being wagged by the rest of the entire dog,
Right.
You're constantly looking at things going, no, that is bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake. And when I'm in control, I will eliminate those things. We won't have those things.
Right.
Right. Of course, as you progress through your career, you realize, and through an organization, especially a large one, you recognize bureaucracy does have a purpose to a point.
Right.
Right. And then human beings create bureaucracy like we create fecal matter. It's just a natural expulsion of what we do as humans.
Right.
And yeah, a big piece of the job is, can you manage to reduce the bureaucracy and identify those things that are not useful to an organization and those things that are? And I would say that's the most valuable thing, right? Is being able to control my calendar and go, yeah, I don't want to do the stupid things and I don't want other people to do the stupid things. So let's do less stupid things and actually mean it and have the ability to make that happen.
And redirect your passion, like both internally, I think where I should spend my passionate time and how I provide guidance to my individual team members. I'll look at a decision that has to be made corporately, and one of my team members will be passionate about turning left or turning right, and I'll stop them and said, does it really matter? Like, is it that important to both your life and to the company life that you should be this passionate about this particular direction? It doesn't really matter. So redirect, right?
Sure.
Bring something to me that you're actually, feel that has an impact on your career, on your team, on your ability to succeed. But this one thing, that's not it.
Yeah,
when I make my own decision, I kind of look at the same thing to say, do I really care whether this statement says it has a comma or not? Like, is it that important to me that
there's a difference? There's a difference, though.
Yeah.
And that is one of the benefits you get the higher you go in an organization is you get the opportunity at more windmills. Right? Because what you're describing is tilting at a windmill. Is it worth the time to tilt at that windmill? Does it actually make a difference?
Right.
Well, if I only have 2 windmills to tilt at, because that's where I'm at in the organization, maybe it is worth it to me.
Okay.
Because anything that creates passion is generally a good thing. So even if the overall impact to your passion to that windmill doesn't matter to me, when I'm looking at 10,000 windmills, it may matter to you. Tilt that windmill all you want. Go for it. I don't want to slow you down or stop you, right? Because I want you to be passionate. But when you're at the top of the organization and you're looking out, you have 10,000 windmills. And so a lot of times I just go, does that thing matter? Yes. Am I going to mess with it? No. Why? Because I can only tilt it 2 windmills today.
Right.
I'll tilt it 2 windmills every single day. When I get to that one's number 998. And when I wake up tomorrow, there's going to be 5 new windmills.
Right.
Right. And so that's one of the things, and it's one of the things that I enjoy the most about being in the position. Right. It's not giving orders. I don't like giving orders. I never have. I don't enjoy it. Right. But I do like being able to pick my own windmills. Right? I do like being able to point at a spot in the organ and just put my thumb on it and go, I need to fix this. I need to fix this one today. Right. Just let me focus. Let me do that thing.
So what has to be true, either in the organization or in the team or your just own philosophy, to allow you to do that? To not think about the 1,000, to think about the 1, to empower others to think about the 1,000.
I have to have a good team. It's the most important thing, right? And I have to have like my mission statement, not the mission statement of the company, but the mission statement of the role that I'm in has to be empowering and impactful. And then I have to like the organization. I think I knew where you were going with that. I hope
that's exactly it. Yeah, exactly.
So it's those things long before before I get to look at any of the windmills, I get to look at those 3 things.
Yeah.
Right? What is the mission? What am I being empowered to do? And what are you asking me to do? What do you want from me? Right? What is the mission of the company? Like, do I even like the company? Because I'm not working for a company I don't like. I'm not working on something that I don't believe the mission is even both accomplishable, right, and something I would enjoy doing.
Right.
And again, right, I've said it on this podcast many times. I'm not the person you want to run your thing. Right. If it isn't broken, don't bring me in. I'm a fixer. Let me fix it.
Right.
And I'm probably going to break it while I fix it to build it better. I'm gonna throw away anything I think doesn't work, and I have to be empowered to do that.
Right.
And then I have to have an excellent team. Now, look, I don't need all A players for 100% of the team, but I better be empowered to replace those that aren't. Right. And I really enjoy working with a team that all the way throughout is all A players. I have no B team. I have a lot of A team.
because of the size of the team.
Oh, it's way easier at a small team,
Yeah.
right? But that would extend, right? When I'm at a bigger team, then A is actually into B because it's just impossible to have all A players.
And the price pressure forces you to create the bell curve, right?
Well, and not everyone can do A work all the time in a big team. You just
Right.
can't. And therefore you're wasting A players,
Right.
right? So whatever A is to you, you still need to aim for that. But you also have to be reasonable, right? Do you really want to burn out A players working on D work? Right? Not that I think you should ever strive for D players, right? But the bigger the organization gets, the more D work you have, the more C minus work you have, the more C work you have, right? Don't burn your people out on stuff that they feel is a waste.
So my response to the question is the same. I'd add that I'd want to be passionate about the company that I'm working for philosophically.
Is that before team?
Pardon?
Is this in order?
No.
Okay.
I didn't order it in my head first, at least.
Right. Well, that's what I meant by like the company, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like you and I both have kind of a North Star job that we would take, that we would hate the job, but we are so passionate about the company that we would take the job.
100%.
Yeah.
So
I'd love to see a comment where people guess what that job is.
100% true. So I want to enjoy the company. I want to enjoy my peers. I want to have I'm less worried about the leadership holistically, more about sort of the second in command. If I have a full 100% trust in the second command, then I know that at least half of the windmills are looked at any one period of time. So I can focus on the ones that made sense to me. And I need that freedom of where to place my attention. If I don't have the freedom to where to place my attention in those windmills or outside to another set of windmills, then I would not enjoy that particular role.
Yeah. So I think for every podcast moving forward, Carlos, I'll give a free 6-month subscription to GigHome to whatever the best comment is.
Nice.
Well, that would be cool.
Specifically for this podcast, the first person in the comments that can guess the role that Paul and I have that we share in common, that we would, either one of us would take if it was offered, we would hate the role, but it's because of the company, we'll get a free 6-month subscription to GigHome.
Nice.
And we cannot play.
That is correct. That is correct.
Only every other radar, though.
Yeah. Only radars that get published on Thursdays, but it's fine.
That's right. You better hope.
Well, my friends, there you have it. Sometimes you have to take the time to analyze where you got there and then what you're doing personally to improve yourself. Sometimes you may have to reflect and then make some actions, but also think about what you're doing for your team. Are you taking the time to help them so they can do the same process? So then together we can impact and transform this world. So, my friends, be the best leader that you can be, and we'll see you on our next episode.